Alright, time for the big one here. Well, so far we've talked about the myth that the actors involved and the director were fans. We've touched on the myth that if you like and or accept the Dragon Ball Z animated films, then you have to accept Dragon Ball Evolution. Now we're moving on to the big one. There's still going to be more, but this is possibly the biggest one that I've heard. And that's this. That, like any other series out there, like they did with the X-Men, like they did with Iron Man, like they did with Spider-Man, like they did with everything, you can take a series and do whatever you want with it because nobody wants to see the same thing over and over. Yeah. I got a couple of issues with that. For good reason. First of all, um, I don't know if you guys noticed, but they didn't quite go ahead and do whatever the heck they wanted to do, did they? But you know what? Let's focus on that later. First of all, let's just take a look at what your people are saying here. That more often than not, your argument is as follows. Well, as much of a fan as I am of Series X or Franchise X, I don't want to see it. If I wanted to see the show slash game slash comic, I would go watch slash play slash read the, you know, so on and so forth. That if I wanted to see the same thing over again, I would just go back to the same old thing. I want something different. Okay, I'm going to break something down to you guys. Adapting something from any other format into film, even if it's a live action television series into a film, is going to require changes. By its very nature, you're not going to be looking at the same thing. At least not a carbon copy. Nobody at any point in time was talking about taking the anime frame for frame and sticking it up on the big screen. That's about the only way you'd be watching the exact same thing over again. What we're talking about here is a faithful adaptation from anime slash manga form into live action. Now, see, this is the interesting part because some people have this very strange definition of what faithful is. They seem to think that something being faithful means a carbon copy, the exact same thing, and therefore it's going to be dull because you already know what happens. Well, here's an interesting thing, and I'm going to actually branch into another little sub-myth to kind of use your own arguments to debunk you guys. You keep saying that the fans don't want to see the same thing over again. Well, I'm going to say that probably yes we do because most of us threw a fit and boycotted the movie. Because it was a stink bomb and went way far off. So yeah, I'd say most of us do. But besides that, it's something that you guys have said like 1,000 times, is that the movie was made for non-fans, which I am gonna touch on that one later. That one's coming up, but listen to yourself. The movie was made for non-fans, which in a way most adaptations are because they're made to bring people into the fandom, which is why you need to stay remotely close to what you're adapting. All right, but because otherwise you're bringing them into something that isn't even. Do you know how many people I know who have been brought into the Resident Evil movies, for example, Resident Evil? They see the movies, they think, oh my gosh, zombies, action, cool, even though they're actually kind of crappy. But like I said, zombie films are going to attract a crowd no matter what. But people see that and then they play the games and they're freaking out because the games are so different from the movies that they're confused. They're wondering where half these characters are, why this character's like this, how did they get to be from this to this in the movie. They don't realize that they're so disassociated from their source that they're something pretty much completely different. They just used the name. And therein lies the problem. See, what you are essentially talking about is somebody writing their own story. Writing their own story. And then slapping the name of another franchise right onto it. Um, so, like, if I were to write a story generic about these kids who go into this fantasy world and fight the bad guys with swords, and then, I mean, just so all over the place, set in modern times with, relationship problems and love triangles, yada yada. And then I slap the Narnia label on there. You're going to say that that's a good adaptation? No, you're going to say it's a horrible adaptation. Are you going to say I'm justified in doing it? Probably not, because I'm so far off. But according to your arguments, with this, you better. You see, it's like that. Now, see, someone could easily say, well, I don't want to read, if I wanted to see the exact same thing over again, I'd read the books again. No, no one wanted to see it. No, no, not everyone who wants to read the books wants to see it frame for frame. Some people probably do. It is cool when that can happen, but, obviously they can't fit everything from one book into the movie, so some stuff's got to get cut for time, which means they have to adjust the story to still try to stay as close as possible but fit around it. And they did that, and they turned out to be good movies. They had to do the same thing with The Lord of the Rings in a couple of cases. Mostly, I'm going to be honest, most of the places where it doesn't match up with the books is because of time. I mean, look at the size of the freaking books, and then look at the movies. The movie, The Return of the King, was already, like, approaching 3 hours long. And there was still more that they had to cut out for time. And even with the stuff that they cut out for time, they still had to leave some stuff out from the books. Okay? It's just, you're going to have that. That, by its very nature, is called adapting something. And there's also a very fine balance, because there's some stuff you just really, really don't want to let go of that sometimes you do have to let go of. For example, certain characters. It's like, oh, but I love this character. This character was so great. They were such an interesting personality. But they don't really add much to the plot overall. So we're going to have to boot them. Now, that has happened in some cases, and it's sad when it does, but you have to keep in mind that this is for the sake of a film. And when people get brought into the fandom, they will see these other characters, because they will check out the source. Alright? You see what I'm saying here? Okay? So, moving onward. It's just fascinating to me how people can make this argument. It's like saying that, something that wasn't made for the fans, yet the fans don't want to see the same thing over again. So what's the matter? It's not made for you. According to you guys. So, but it's just fascinating. When it gets to the point that you can honestly say that I don't want to see anything even remotely resembling the old one, I want to see something that's so different that it's something else, like an alternate universe, then I dare say, sir, that you are approaching the point when you are no longer a fan. As I said, if you start getting that sick of something, walk away from it for a little bit and come back. That's what I do. Okay, that's what most sane people do. When you're sitting there, you're watching something, you love the crap out of it, reading something, you love the crap out of it, you play a game, listen to music, you love the song, you love the game, but after a while it does start to get old. So do you hate it and want something else? No, you leave it alone for a while and then you come back to it later. That's what normal people do. But just sit there and say, oh my gosh, I can't stand this, I want something completely different, but at the same time I like these characters and what they can do. See, that's another thing. You're not even saying for the sake of, keep the characters but put them in a different setting. Were you saying that might actually be somewhat acceptable. The Dragon Ball films, the Dragon Ball animated movies, did the same thing with Curse of the Blood Rubies. They did the same thing with Mystical Adventure. They did the same thing with Path to Power. Path to Power is probably what DBE should have been. It took Dragon Ball. Pilaf, a lot of people have said, wouldn't make a very interesting movie villain. That is possible. So what'd they do? They managed to cut Pilaf out and work around him to the Red Ribbon Army, and it was still good. I mean, this is the kind of thing that you can do to adapt something. Now, I know some people are going to say, well, Pilaf's important later. There are ways you can get around that, too. Because the only significant thing, really, truly significant, 100% significant thing that Pilaf does later is he unleashes Piccolo. And there are other ways you can do that. I'm not saying that they're preferred, but I'm just saying, I'm giving examples of how you can, it wouldn't 100% totally flip the plot for that to happen, provided you can give someone who is there good motivation. Just he's out for the heck of it. That was ridiculous. Okay, I'm not gonna lie, that was just plain stupid. Um, I seriously, no one to this day has ever been able to explain how, in God's name, Piccolo was out in DBE. No one can. No one can. People will come up with all these theories, but when I ask them for evidence, they got nothing. Anyways, but see, this is just it. When you're taking a closed series, I mean, this isn't. See, the thing is, you're making arguments like Marvel and DC Comics and stuff like that. I give them a little more wiggle room because they have been changed so many times. They've had multiple authors, multiple illustrators, multiple editors. You know, everyone they have had several people there with their own vision of what the character is and what the story should be. So I mean, you're not going to have the same type of characters under certain writers. That just don't happen. So when they do the film versions, they got a little more leeway there. But this is a closed epic. It's got a beginning, a middle, and an end. It's one long story. Alright? This isn't this series and then this series with a similar name and then that. No. This is one closed off, sealed storyline beginning to end. And what you're essentially talking about is that they can change this here somehow, but then somehow still make this part here, the part that you seem to like more than the others, more accurate, despite this, the very beginning, being changed. You see what I'm saying here? It's there are just some things that you can't do with the parameters that a series gives you. There's no uniform means of adapting everything. So not everything goes contrary to popular belief. It depends on your source, depends on the subject matter, and it depends on, well, sometimes right down to the series itself. But when you're willing to say that they can take these characters, put them in a world that is clearly not the world they came from, into a plotline that is in no way, shape, or form the plotline that they came from, and then even sacrifice what made them them, what made them act like them, what made them behave like them, and say it doesn't matter so long as they have the name, then yeah, I'm going to say it, you're no longer a fan. Anyways, that's it for now. Later.